Hey guys, tonight we are heading somewhere cold. Not the pleasant kind of cold that makes a fire feel cozy from the other side of a window, but the enormous empty cold of the southern Great Plains, where there may be nothing between you and the northern horizon except grass darkness and a wind that seems to have been gathering speed since Canada. There will be horses tonight. There will be buffalo hides, glowing coals, canyon walls, and a few uncomfortable lessons about what happens when you underestimate winter. So if you enjoy these slow journeys into the quieter corners of history, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, pull the blanket a little higher, and let the modern room around you disappear. Because when you open your eyes again, it is winter on the southern plains. And you are very, very far from home. The first thing you notice is the wind. You hear it before you understand anything else. It moves through the dry grass with a long whisper, then strikes the hide around you with a low, trembling sound. Somewhere outside, a horse snorts. Leather creaks, a branch scratches against another branch beside the creek. You lie still beneath a heavy buffalo robe. For several sleepy moments, you have no reason to move. This is fortunate, because outside the shelter, the night is trying to kill anything careless enough to remain exposed to it. You are somewhere in Comanche, the immense homeland that once stretches across much of the southern Great Plains. Far beyond your sleeping place are territories that, in another age, will carry names like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. But those borders mean nothing here. The land is understood differently. There are rivers, buffalo trails, waterholes, high plains, canyons, places where horses can graze, places where enemies may approach unseen. And, most important tonight, places where the winter wind cannot reach you quite so easily. If you had arrived here believing that survival in the cold is mainly a matter of toughness, the plains would correct you quickly. Cold does not care how brave you are. Wind does not become impressed because you can ride well or fight well. A frozen night is a problem of heat, shelter, food, moisture, and time. Your body is warm. The world around it is not. From the moment darkness falls, the problem is simple. How do you stop your warmth from escaping before morning? The answer begins long before you lie down. It begins with the landscape. A Comanche band preparing for winter does not simply stop wherever evening happens to find it. The exposed plains may be excellent country for traveling, hunting, watching distant movement, and following buffalo. They can be miserable country for sleeping in a winter storm. So as the season changes, people look toward lower ground, toward creek valleys, toward timber, toward the great cuts in the earth where stone itself can stand between a camp and the wind. One of the most famous of these places is Palo Duro Canyon. From the high plains above, the earth suddenly falls away into a vast broken country of cliffs, slopes, side canyons, creek beds, and bands of colored stone. Down below, the world feels different. The wind that races freely across the plateau meets canyon walls. Water can be found. Wood grows along the drainage. Animals find shelter, and human beings do as well. Tonight, your camp rests in such protected country. The difference becomes obvious when you crawl toward the entrance. You lift the edge only slightly. Cold air immediately pushes against your face. It smells of dry grass, horsehair, smoke, and frost. Beyond the shelter, moonlight lies pale across the canyon floor. A few fires remain visible between the lodges, most have burned low. Horses stand nearby in the darkness, their bodies occasionally shifting, their breath briefly appearing in the cold air. Above everything rise the canyon walls. They are not merely scenery tonight. They are part of your shelter. This is perhaps the first thing you must understand about surviving a freezing night here. Your bedroom begins miles before your bed. Choosing the right ground can matter as much as choosing the right blanket. A person sleeping on the open plateau may need to fight the wind for every scrap of warmth. A person below the rim begins the night with an advantage. The land has already done part of the work. You lower the hide again. Almost immediately, the air feels calmer. Warmth has been collected here in layers. That word layers will follow you through the night. There is no single magical object keeping you alive. No miraculous blanket, no enormous fire, no secret herb. Instead, one small advantage sits on top of another. The canyon weakens the wind. The shelter catches warmer air. The bedding separates your body from the ground. The robe traps the heat, leaving your skin. The fire warms the space. Food gives your body energy to continue producing heat. Even the placement of animals and supplies around camp matters. One layer may fail, another remains. This is what generations of experience have produced, not a trick, but a system. And systems are much less dramatic than legends, which is probably why they work. Outside, someone walks past. You hear moccasins against the earth and then the faint scrape of wood. A few moments later comes the soft crackle of a fire being encouraged back to life. Nobody seems surprised by the cold. Nobody has woken in panic and begun running around looking for more blankets. The preparation happened earlier. That is another uncomfortable lesson. Winter survival is mostly decided before you become cold. Once your hands are numb and your body begins to shake badly, your choices become fewer. The people around you know this because their parents knew it. Their grandparents knew it. And generations before them learned the same lesson through observation, memory, and sometimes loss. Knowledge here is not stored in a printed wilderness manual. It is stored in habits, in where camp is placed, in how hides are prepared, in how a lodge is raised, in which fuel is collected, in when the buffalo coat becomes thick enough to make the best winter robe. A child does not need to understand the physics of insulation to learn that a certain way of arranging bedding keeps the frozen earth from stealing warmth. A woman does not need an equation describing convection to know what happens when a draft enters beneath the edge of a teepee. The language of science may come later. The cold comes first. And the cold is an excellent teacher. You settle back beneath the robe. It is heavier than the blankets you know from home. Its fur presses around your shoulders, dense and uneven, carrying the faint smell of smoke. Beneath you is another layer separating your body from the earth. That lower layer is easy to forget. You may imagine that cold comes mainly from the air, but the ground is greedy. Lie directly against frozen earth and your body begins warming it. The earth, being considerably larger than you, wins this exchange. So warmth must be protected below as carefully as above. The bed becomes a small island, hide, fur. Dry material. Your body, another robe. Warm air, then the larger shelter around all of it. And beyond that, the canyon, layer inside layer. You begin to understand why an outsider watching from a distance might misunderstand Comanche winter life. From the ridge above, there is no stone house, no brick chimney, no glass window, no permanent wall. Everything appears temporary, portable, fragile, yet portability is not necessarily weakness. A permanent house cannot follow buffalo. It cannot move when grazing disappears. It cannot easily leave a dangerous camp. It cannot fold itself onto a travois and travel toward a better winter refuge. Here, survival depends partly upon knowing when not to remain in one place. The landscape changes, the herds move, water changes, grass changes, enemies move, weather changes. So the home must be able to move too. The wind rises again outside. You hear it rushing somewhere high above the canyon. For a moment it sounds like distant surf, yet only a weakened breath of it reaches you. You imagine the plateau overhead, flat, pale, and exposed beneath the stars. A traveler caught there tonight would have few places to hide. A soldier unfamiliar with this country might search desperately for timber. He might pile on clothing already damp from sweat. He might build too large a fire and exhaust his fuel. He might sleep directly against cold ground because the danger beneath him seems less obvious than the wind around him. Each mistake would be small. Together they could become fatal. That is the strange arithmetic of winter. Death does not always arrive as one great disaster. Sometimes it arrives as 6 little mistakes, and survival can work exactly the same way. 6 little advantages: a wall of earth, a carefully placed lodge, a dry robe, a protected ember, a full stomach, a horse close enough to hear breathing in the dark. None seems heroic. By dawn, heroism matters considerably less than whether you are still warm. The fire nearby gives a soft pop. Someone murmurs in the darkness. Then everything settles again. You close your eyes. For now, the cold remains outside, but the canyon is only the first defense. To understand why you can lie here listening to the winter wind instead of trembling beneath it, we need to look more closely at the remarkable little world built around your sleeping body. Because on the plains, warmth is not simply found, it is constructed. The warmth around you is not accidental. Long before darkness settles over the canyon, the camp has already been shaped around the coming night. Horses have been brought closer. Fuel has been gathered. Bedding has been arranged. The lodges stand where the canyon walls and nearby timber soften the wind. And now, as you lie beneath the buffalo robe, you begin to notice something else. The teepee is breathing. Not literally, of course, but listen carefully. Near the lower edge of the lodge, cool air enters in a controlled draft. It moves upward toward the small fire, feeding the flames with oxygen. Warm air rises above it, carrying smoke toward the opening overhead. The smoke flaps help guide that dark stream into the night. The result is surprisingly comfortable. You have a fire inside a shelter without filling the entire space with choking smoke. This sounds like a simple achievement. It is not. Fire inside an enclosed shelter creates an ancient problem. Close the shelter too tightly, and smoke gathers around the people within. Open it too much, and precious warmth escapes. The teepee balances these competing needs. Its tall, conical shape gives rising smoke somewhere to go. Its opening allows ventilation. Its adjustable flaps respond to changes in the wind. And there is another layer. Around the inside wall hangs a lining. This lining does something rather clever. It creates a space between the outer covering and the living area, trapping a layer of air while also helping control drafts. You do not need to know the modern vocabulary of insulation to appreciate the result. You only need to put your hand near the wall. Outside, winter air presses against the hide. Inside, the air around you remains calmer. The difference is enough to matter. In severe weather, dry grass can provide still more insulation. Again, nothing here is magical. Grass is ordinary, hide is ordinary, wooden poles are ordinary, fire is ordinary. The intelligence lies in the arrangement. It is the same lesson the night keeps teaching you. Survival is often less about possessing extraordinary materials than understanding ordinary ones extremely well. You shift beneath your robe and look upward. In the dim orange light, the poles disappear into darkness above your head. The structure seems almost impossibly tall compared with its footprint. A typical plains teepee requires many long poles, carefully chosen for strength and straightness. The Comanche traditionally use a four-pole foundation arrangement, upon which the remaining poles can be placed. Over this skeleton comes the outer covering. Before manufactured canvas becomes common, buffalo hides provide the material. Preparing enough hides for a large lodge requires enormous labor. They must be cleaned, scraped, stretched, prepared, cut, sewn, maintained. And when the band moves, the entire home must come down again. That work is largely in the hands of women. This is easy to overlook if your picture of Comanche history is dominated by warriors on horseback. The mounted warrior is dramatic. A woman scraping a hide beside a creek is quieter. Yet tonight, one of those activities matters much more to you than the other. A warrior may protect a camp from an enemy. The women who make and maintain the lodge protect everyone from the weather. And the weather comes every winter. The teepee belongs to the woman who manages it. She knows how the covering should sit. She understands the poles. She knows where possessions belong inside. She recognizes when a seam needs attention. She can read the wind and adjust the shelter accordingly. When it is time to move, she helps turn the home back into a portable bundle. The transformation is remarkable. A structure large enough to shelter a family becomes hides, poles, bedding, tools and possessions ready for transport. Some of the same long poles that form the skeleton of the teepee can become part of a travois. The house, in a sense, helps carry itself. Nothing about this arrangement makes sense if you imagine a home as something that must remain permanently attached to one patch of earth. But Comanche life follows movement. Buffalo do not stay still because your house is comfortable. Grass for horses does not remain abundant because you would prefer not to pack. Water does not promise to remain nearby. So the architecture follows the needs of life. Your home must be sturdy tonight and portable tomorrow. It must resist wind, but also come apart. It must allow fire, but release smoke. It must be spacious enough for family life, yet light enough to travel across an enormous territory. These demands pull in opposite directions. The teepee survives because generations have learned how to balance them. Outside, a horse stamps against the cold earth. You hear another answer from farther along the camp, then silence returns. Perhaps this is the strangest part of your first winter night. You expected noise, struggle, people desperately fighting the cold until sunrise. Instead, there is mostly sleep. That is the measure of a successful survival system. When it works, survival can look almost boring. A child sleeping under robes does not appear heroic. A grandmother tending an ember does not appear heroic. A woman adjusting a smoke flap does not appear heroic. But the purpose of all this accumulated knowledge is precisely to prevent the night from becoming dramatic. The best winter night is one in which nothing happens. No one develops frostbite, no fire spreads through the lodge, no horse disappears. No storm tears the shelter apart, no one wakes shivering uncontrollably. Morning simply arrives. You begin to appreciate why the choice of canyon mattered so much. Imagine the same lodge on the exposed high plains above you. The teepee is still strong. Its conical form handles wind better than a broad flat wall would. But every gust steals heat. Every opening becomes harder to control. Every trip outside becomes more unpleasant. More fuel may be required. The horses are more exposed. A single shelter can only do so much. Place that shelter behind the protection of canyon walls, however, and suddenly the entire system becomes more efficient. This is why winter camps are not simply summer camps with colder weather. Season changes behavior in warmer months. A band can move onto the plains, following buffalo and making use of open country. In winter, sheltered valleys and canyons become increasingly valuable. Water, timber, grazing, protection and concealment all shape where people stop. The landscape itself becomes part of the architecture. Perhaps your ancestors, wherever they lived, understood something similar. A farmhouse faces one direction rather than another. A village grows beside a river, but above its floodline. A house in a windy country crouches behind a hill. A settlement in a hot country makes use of shade. People learn the personality of a place. The Comanche learn the southern plains with extraordinary intimacy because their survival depends upon it. A distant cloud can mean weather. The behavior of horses can mean danger. A trail can reveal movement. A creek can determine whether a camp remains for another day. The thickness of a buffalo coat can tell you what the season is becoming. The direction of the wind can change where smoke goes inside your home. These observations accumulate. One winter becomes another. One generation teaches the next. There is no single morning on which someone announces that the Comanche winter system has finally been invented. Instead, it grows slowly. Someone learns that one campsite is warmer than another. Someone improves the placement of a lining. Someone discovers a better way to preserve an ember. Someone becomes exceptionally skilled at tanning a winter robe. Someone remembers where wood remains available during severe weather. Someone teaches a daughter, someone teaches a son, and centuries later, you wake beneath the result. A gust passes over the canyon rim. You can hear its distant voice. Inside, the fire is fading again. Its flames shrink until there is mostly red light beneath a covering of ash. Nobody rushes to rebuild it. That surprises you. Surely the sensible thing would be to keep a roaring fire all night. But a large fire consumes fuel quickly. It requires attention. It can make the shelter dangerously hot near the flames, while allowing other areas to remain cold. And, of course, an open fire inside a home is something you would prefer not to roll into while asleep. The goal is not to turn the tipi into summer. The goal is to create enough warmth. Enough is one of the most useful words in winter survival. Enough shelter, enough fuel, enough insulation, enough food, enough dryness. Trying to overpower the cold wastes resources. Working with the environment uses less, so the fire settles. The robe does more of the work now. You pull it around your neck. The fur traps the warmth your body is already producing. Beneath you, the bedding slows the cold rising from the ground. Around you, the lining controls drafts. Around that, the outer covering resists the weather. Around that, trees and terrain provide another barrier. Around everything, the canyon waits in darkness. It is almost like sleeping inside a series of invisible walls. Your body lies at the center. The farther outward you move, the larger each defense becomes. Robe, bedding, tipi, camp, canyon, landscape. Each performs a different task. And this is why simply copying one piece of Comanche technology would never give an outsider the entire advantage. A buffalo robe alone is useful, a teepee alone is useful, a sheltered canyon alone is useful. But the knowledge lies in combining them. Soon the fire is little more than coals. The interior darkens. You hear slow breathing nearby. Then the faint rustle of someone turning beneath a robe. The temperature outside continues falling. Frost forms across grass and leather. Water at the edges of shallow pools begins to harden. The horses draw closer together, high above. The stars seem painfully bright in the dry winter air. Yet beneath your layers you remain warm. And for a moment you understand something that an approaching army will later learn in a far harsher way. The strength of Comanche life on these plains does not come only from warriors who can fight from horseback. It comes from families who know how to live here, how to move, how to build, how to find water, how to preserve food, how to protect horses, how to read weather, how to turn hides and grass and wood into warmth. A military force can defeat warriors in battle and still fail to control a people who can disappear into country that kills their pursuers. To truly break such independence, an enemy would eventually have to attack more than fighters. It would have to attack the system that makes life possible. That part of the story is still waiting for us farther down the trail. For now, however, the canyon is quiet. Your shelter stands. Your fire still has life buried beneath its ash, and your first freezing night on the plains is becoming less frightening. But the ground beneath you will remain cold until morning. The fire will continue fading, and the deepest hours of the night are still ahead. So we drift onward, from the shelter around you to the smaller, softer shelter, wrapped directly around your body, because building a warm place to sleep is only half the problem. The next challenge is keeping that warmth beside you until dawn. Let us leave the broad canyon walls behind for a while and move inward toward the smaller world of fur, hide, warmth, and sleeping bodies. The coldest part of the night has arrived. The fire has fallen low enough that its light barely reaches the walls of the teepee. What remains is a red glow beneath grey ash, occasionally brightening when a buried coal collapses into another. You are awake again, not because you're freezing, because your shoulder is uncomfortable. This is reassuringly ordinary. You shift beneath the buffalo robe and immediately discover why the bedding matters so much. The moment one part of your body moves away from the warm hollow you have created, cold air finds the opening. You quickly pull the robe back into place. The warmth returns slowly, and now you begin to understand the third layer of the winter system, the buffalo robe. It is tempting to imagine a buffalo robe as simply a large piece of fur. That description is technically correct in the same way that calling a teepee a pile of hides is technically correct. It misses almost everything important. Not every buffalo hide makes the same kind of winter covering. Season matters. During warmer months, the animal carries a thinner coat. Such hides remain valuable. They can be turned toward many practical uses, including shelter and clothing. But winter changes the buffalo. As temperatures fall, the coat becomes thicker and denser. For a person trying to sleep through a freezing night, that difference matters enormously. A winter robe holds a remarkable amount of air within its fur. And trapped air is what you want. Your body is continuously producing heat. The robe does not create that heat. Instead, it slows the escape. This distinction seems small until you are lying in darkness with winter. Only a few layers away, you are the furnace. The robe is the wall around the furnace. Every warm breath, every heartbeat, every bit of food your body has turned into energy contributes to the small climate beneath the fur. This is why the robe feels warmer after you have been under it for a while. You are heating it, and it is helping you keep what you have made. But the robe above you is only part of the arrangement. There are hides beneath you as well. Perhaps dry grass or other insulating material has been arranged below the bedding. This lower protection is essential because the earth has been losing heat for hours. Touch the ground with your hand and you understand immediately it is hard. Cold, uninterested in your comfort. If you sleep directly against it, warmth flows from your body downward, slowly at first. Then continuously, you may have excellent protection above and still become dangerously cold from below. So the Comanche sleeping arrangement works in both directions. The upper layers trap warmth. The lower layers prevent the earth from stealing it. Again, the solution is not one miraculous object, it is arrangement. A person with several excellent robes who places them badly may sleep colder than someone with fewer materials who understands where insulation is needed. You hear movement beside you, someone reaches toward the bedding, there is a faint scrape. Then something warm is pushed closer to where you are lying. A stone. Earlier in the evening, before the camp became quiet, stones were placed near the fire. They absorbed heat while everyone ate, talked, repaired equipment, tended horses, and prepared for sleep. Now that stored warmth can be moved, carefully. A stone taken directly from a fire can burn skin or damage a hide, so heated stones must be handled with respect. Wrapped or positioned safely, however, they become slow sources of radiant heat. You place one near your feet. At first, the warmth seems almost too strong. You pull your feet away slightly. A few moments later, you move them closer again. There, better. The stone asks for nothing. It consumes no additional fuel. It produces no smoke. It does not need someone to remain awake feeding it. It simply releases the heat it collected earlier. Slowly, quietly, for a sleeping family. That is extremely useful. Think of how modest the technology is. A rock, a fire, a piece of hide. Yet the principle is elegant. Instead of depending entirely on an open flame throughout the night, heat can be collected when the fire is strong and released later where it is needed most. Your feet approve of the idea. Outside, the temperature continues falling. Inside your bedding, the little stone radiates patiently. You begin to feel sleepy again. But before you drift away, consider the amount of work hidden inside the robe resting over you. A buffalo does not become bedding merely because someone has hunted it. The hide must be removed and prepared. That preparation demands knowledge, strength, patience, and time. Much of this work is performed by women. The hide is scraped to remove unwanted tissue. It is stretched. It is worked repeatedly. It must become soft enough to fold around a human body rather than remaining a stiff sheet. A badly prepared hide is inconvenient. A skillfully prepared robe is supple, durable, and warm. The difference becomes especially obvious in winter. Cold makes poor materials reveal their weaknesses. Anything stiff becomes stiffer. Anything damp becomes dangerous. Anything badly repaired finds a way to fail at the least pleasant moment. So preparing a winter robe is not decorative work. It is survival work. The same hands that maintain the teepee may also prepare the bedding inside it. And once again, much of the knowledge keeping the camp alive belongs not to the warrior riding dramatically across the horizon, but to the people whose labor rarely appears in heroic paintings. Imagine spending day after day scraping a hide. Your shoulders ache, your hands become tired, smoke drifts through camp, children move around you, dogs investigate anything that smells interesting, someone needs water, someone needs food, horses need attention, the work continues. Eventually, the rough hide becomes something soft enough to sleep beneath. Months later, on a night like this one, nobody gives a speech about it. They simply remain warm. That is the reward, the quiet absence of disaster. You curl your toes near the heated stone. Its warmth has softened now. It no longer feels hot, only comforting. Above you, the smoke opening shows a small piece of night sky. Stars appear and disappear behind thin movements of smoke. You listen to the fire. A coal cracks, then silence. It is easy, from a comfortable modern bed, to think of historical survival as a constant contest of endurance. People in the past were tougher, we tell ourselves. They simply tolerated things that would make us miserable. There is some truth in the fact that people become accustomed to the conditions they know. But toughness is a poor explanation for what is happening around you. No amount of courage changes heat transfer. A brave person lying wet on frozen ground becomes cold. A frightened person wrapped in dry insulation inside a protected shelter remains warmer. The body obeys the same rules either way. What changes is knowledge. The Comanche do not survive this night because they have trained themselves not to notice winter. They notice winter very carefully. They notice where the wind comes from. They notice the condition of the ground. They notice which buffalo hides are best. They notice how much fuel remains. They notice where the bedding is dry. They notice when the weather is changing. They notice where horses can be protected. They notice when a campsite has become unsuitable and it is time to move. Survival begins with attention. Perhaps that is why the entire system feels so calm. Nobody expects the weather to become merciful. The expectation is that winter will behave like winter. Preparation follows from that assumption. The wind can howl, the temperature can fall, the ground can freeze. None of these things is an insult or a surprise. They are simply conditions to work around. You hear the horses again, one gives a low snort, another shifts its weight. Their presence is comforting for reasons that extend beyond companionship. A good horse is mobility. It can carry you toward water, buffalo, shelter, or safety. A horse also represents wealth. It may be traded, bred, raced, used in hunting, used in war. And among the Comanche, skill with horses becomes one of the defining features of life. But that story can wait. Tonight, you are more interested in the warmth at your feet. The stone is cooling, that is expected. Nothing stays warm forever. The question is whether each layer lasts long enough for another layer to continue doing its job. The fire declines. The stone releases stored heat. The robe traps body warmth. The bedding separates you from the earth. Your body continues burning the energy from the evening meal. The canyon continues blocking much of the wind. Hour follows hour. No single defense needs to be perfect. Together, they only need to carry you until sunrise. This is redundancy, though nobody around you needs that word. If the stone becomes cold, the robe remains. If the fire fades, the bedding remains. If the wind changes, the teepee remains. If one source of warmth weakens, another continues. And if conditions become truly dangerous, the camp can move. That last possibility matters. A portable home means survival is not tied to a single location. When resources disappear, people can follow them. When the buffalo move, families can move. When grazing becomes poor, horses can be taken elsewhere. When enemies approach, camp can be broken. When winter makes the high plains dangerous, people can descend into protected country. Mobility is another form of shelter. You cannot freeze inside a storm you have already avoided. The thought is simple enough that you almost smile. Historical survival turns out to involve a surprising amount of not being where the worst thing is happening. The robe settles heavily across your chest. Your breathing slows. The stone near your feet is now merely warm. Soon it will be cool. That is fine. Morning is closer than it was. Yet before dawn arrives, there is another problem to solve. Fire. Because the easiest fire to light on a freezing morning is the one you never completely allowed to die. And somewhere beneath that dull blanket of ash in the center of the teepee, a few red embers are waiting. We drift deeper into the forgotten night, toward the hours when flames disappear and only coals remain. The question is no longer how to make a fire. It is how to persuade yesterday's fire to survive until tomorrow. The fire appears dead. At least, that is what you think when you wake again. The teepee is darker now. The orange glow that once painted the hides has vanished, and the center of the shelter contains what looks like nothing more than a quiet mound of grey ash. Your heated stone has gone cold. The air against your face is sharper. Yet beneath the buffalo robe, your body remains warm. For a moment, you simply listen. Wind passes somewhere beyond the canyon walls. A horse shifts outside. Someone nearby breathes slowly beneath another robe. Then a figure moves beside the fire. There is no hurry, no desperate search for flint, no pile of fresh tinder being assembled with numb fingers. Instead, a hand reaches carefully toward the ashes. The upper layer is disturbed. Grey powder moves aside, and underneath it, something glows red, small, alive. Yesterday's fire has survived the night. This is another modest piece of winter knowledge, and like so many useful things, it does not look impressive. Before sleeping, hot coals can be protected beneath ash. The ash acts as a barrier, slowing the loss of heat and limiting the flow of air, enough to keep the fuel from burning away too quickly. By morning, embers may remain beneath the surface, not flames, not a roaring fire, just enough. A little dry fuel is added, someone bends low, air moves across the coal, the red glow brightens, a thin thread of smoke rises. Then comes a tiny flame. You watch it climb into the kindling. The whole process takes remarkably little effort. On a warm afternoon, this would merely be convenient. On a freezing morning, convenience becomes survival. Imagine the alternative. You wake after hours of cold, your hands are stiff, your breath hangs in front of your face. Perhaps frost has formed on equipment, perhaps your easiest tinder has absorbed moisture. You must now create fire from the beginning. Every minute without warmth feels longer than it should. The task is possible, of course, but why solve the same problem every morning when you can preserve part of yesterday's solution? So the fire is carried through time, not as flame, as potential. Soon the little flame becomes several. The tipi begins to brighten, the smoke rises toward the opening overhead, and your eyes adjust to the returning light. Around you, the sleeping space becomes visible again, robes, hides, poles, bundles, tools, personal belongings. Everything has a place. Nothing suggests luxury, yet very little is without purpose. That economy extends beyond the shelter. Fuel itself is a problem on the plains. You may have imagined an endless stack of split firewood beside every tipi. The landscape has other ideas. Along creek bottoms and inside protected canyons, timber can be found. Out on the broad grasslands, however, trees may become scarce. A traveling band cannot assume that convenient piles of wood will appear whenever someone wants a hot meal. Fortunately, buffalo leaves something useful behind: dung. Dried buffalo dung, commonly called buffalo chips, becomes one of the ordinary fuels of plains life. This may not be the most romantic detail you have encountered tonight. History rarely remains romantic once someone needs to cook dinner. A dried buffalo chip is light enough to gather, common wherever large herds have passed, and capable of burning steadily when properly dried. Across country where wood may be limited, this matters. The buffalo provides meat, hide, bone, sinew, fat, and, indirectly, fuel. Even after the herd has moved over the horizon, evidence of its presence remains scattered across the grass. Someone must gather that fuel. Again, survival contains far more collecting than fighting. You can picture children moving around camp, gathering useful pieces from the ground. You can picture women assessing what will be needed before darkness. You can picture bundles being kept dry. The task is humble. Yet a person who neglects humble tasks eventually discovers how important they were. A warrior may own an excellent horse and possess great courage. Neither will boil water, neither will warm cold hands. A buffalo chip will. The fire strengthens. You extend your hands toward it. Warmth reaches your fingers. After spending the night beneath the robe, you had almost forgotten how cold the exposed air inside the teepee had become. Your hands remind you immediately. The difference between the bedding and the room itself is substantial. This is another reason not to imagine the interior as permanently hot. The tipi does not need to remain at some perfect, comfortable temperature throughout the night. The sleeping system creates a smaller, warm environment around the body. The fire supplements it. This uses less fuel. It also means that leaving the bedding in the morning requires a certain amount of determination. You understand this very well. You remain under the robe longer than necessary. History can wait. Eventually, however, someone near you begins preparing for the day. The camp is waking. Outside comes the sound of movement. Horses, footsteps, a dog, the low murmur of voices. A piece of wood being moved. The first pale suggestion of morning appears through the smoke opening. You finally push the robe aside. Cold air rushes across your clothing. You immediately regret every decision that led to this moment. But the fire is waiting. You crouch near it. The warmth touches your face. Behind you, the buffalo robe lies in a heavy pile, holding the last of your sleeping warmth. It has done its job. So has the tipi. So has the canyon. And so has that tiny ember someone protected before going to sleep. The system has carried you through another night, Yet the morning reveals the work required to make tonight possible. Bedding must be aired when conditions allow, equipment must remain dry, fuel must be gathered, horses must be checked, food must be prepared, the fire must be managed. If the band intends to move, the entire camp may soon change shape. This is where the role of Comanche women becomes impossible to ignore. The tipi in which you slept is not simply a structure used by the family. Its construction, ownership, maintenance, and movement belong deeply within women's work and knowledge. A skilled woman understands the lodge as intimately as a skilled rider understands a horse. She knows the hides, she knows the seams, she knows the poles. She knows how the covering behaves in weather. And when camp moves, she knows how to make a standing home disappear. The transformation begins from the outside. Fastenings are loosened, the covering comes away. Poles that reached into the sky are lowered. Possessions are gathered. Bedding is bundled. What had seemed permanent during the night becomes portable again. Some poles can become part of the travois used for transport. A horse pulls the load. The family moves later. The process reverses. Poles rise, coverings stretch around them. Bedding returns to the ground. A fire appears. Home exists again. To an outsider, this might look like repeatedly destroying and rebuilding a house. To a mobile plains culture, it is simply what a house is supposed to do. It follows life. This flexibility becomes especially important because the Comanche world is tied closely to horses and buffalo. A permanent settlement would impose limits. Buffalo herds move, horse grazing changes, water conditions change, weather changes, a mobile camp can respond, and responding quickly is itself a kind of security. You cannot command the plains to provide what you need. You can move toward where those things are available. That principle shapes almost everything. The teepee is portable because life is mobile. Possessions must be considered in terms of transport. Food must survive journeys. Tools should justify the effort of carrying them. Materials often serve more than one purpose. A hide is not merely a hide depending on its preparation. It can become clothing, bedding, shelter, storage, or equipment. A pole is not merely part of a house. It can help transport that house. A horse is not merely transportation. It is wealth, hunting power, military power, trade, status, and mobility gathered into one living animal. Efficiency here does not mean owning very little simply for the sake of simplicity. It means understanding the cost of everything you carry. The plains teach this lesson constantly. Every object has weight. Every horse has limits. Every journey requires energy. Every winter camp eventually becomes a traveling camp again. So knowledge matters more than possessions alone. If a robe is lost, the skill to prepare another remains. If a tipi covering becomes damaged, someone knows how to repair it. If a fire dies, someone knows how to make another. If a familiar campsite becomes unusable, people know other places. The most valuable survival equipment is partly invisible. It exists inside memory. This is why knowledge passed between generations matters so deeply. A girl watching her mother work is not merely watching household labor. She is learning architecture, weather management, material preparation, transportation, resource use. She learns through repetition. The same actions return with each move. Take down, pack, travel, choose ground, raise poles, stretch the covering, arrange the interior, build fire, sleep, wake, repeat. Over years, movements that once required thought become instinctive. The hands remember. And this kind of knowledge is difficult for an outsider to copy quickly. A soldier can look at a teepee and understand its general shape. That does not mean he knows how to live inside one through an entire winter. He can acquire a buffalo robe. That does not mean he understands how to combine it with dry bedding, terrain, food, fire, and weather awareness. He can steal a horse. That does not make him a Comanche rider. Objects are only the visible part of a culture's technology. The invisible part is knowing what to do with them. The morning light grows stronger. You step outside. Frost covers the grass. The cold reaches your face immediately. Above the canyon rim, the sky is pale and enormous. Smoke rises from several lodges along the sheltered ground. People move between them. The camp that seemed almost silent during the night now slowly returns to life. A woman tends a fire. Someone carries fuel. A child appears from a lodge wrapped against the morning cold. Nearby, horses stand together, their winter coats catching the weak light. You look toward the high walls surrounding the camp. Last night they protected you from the wind. This morning they glow faintly with sunrise. For generations, places like this offer something precious on the southern plains, not perfect safety. There is no such thing, but protection. A little less wind, a little more timber, nearby water, defensible ground. Enough advantages stacked together to make winter manageable. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson of the first part of your journey. The Comanche winter system does not conquer nature. It does not make January behave like June. It does not eliminate cold. Instead, it reduces each problem until the human body can manage what remains. Block some wind, trap some air, save some heat, preserve some fire, carry enough food, keep the bedding dry, move when necessary. Small solutions, repeated every day. The dramatic stories will come later. There will be cavalry, there will be pursuit. There will be a canyon filled with frightened horses and burning lodges. But none of that makes sense until you understand what those lodges mean. A teepee is not simply something an army can burn. It contains labor, memory, skill, winter security, family life, and an entire portable architecture adapted to a landscape where staying in the wrong place can become deadly. You stand beside the morning fire and watch smoke disappear into the pale sky. Soon, breakfast will matter. Because shelter can slow the loss of body heat, but it cannot create energy from nothing. Through the long cold night, your body has been working continuously. Your heart has kept beating. Your lungs have kept moving. Your muscles have maintained temperature. All of this costs fuel, and the Comanche answer to that problem is waiting in food dense with meat and fat. Now we move from the smoke-darkened teepee toward the cooking fire, where another part of winter survival is beginning to warm. Because sometimes the most important fire on a freezing night is not the one beside you. It is the one burning quietly inside your own body. We drift onward, deeper into the forgotten days, leaving the morning frost outside and moving closer to the cooking fire. The smell reaches you before you see the food. Smoke. Roasted meat. Warm fat. After a night spent beneath buffalo robes, your body understands the message immediately. You are hungry. Not the mild hunger that suggests breakfast would be pleasant. This is the deep, physical hunger of a body that has spent hours producing heat in cold weather. Even while you slept, you were working. Your heart continued beating, your lungs continued drawing cold air. Your muscles maintained the temperature of your body. Every hour required energy, and that energy has to come from somewhere. So you sit near the fire while food is prepared. There is buffalo meat, of course. For the Comanche, the buffalo is not simply one source of food among many. It stands near the center of life on the plains. The animal provides meat and fat. Its hide can become shelter, clothing, bedding, containers, and other useful objects. Sinew can serve as strong thread. Bones can become tools. Even dried dung can provide fuel where wood is scarce. A buffalo moving across the grass is, in a sense, carrying an astonishing collection of useful materials on four legs. But this morning you're interested in the part that can be eaten, especially the fat. Modern people are often taught to think about fat with suspicion. On a freezing plain, the conversation changes. Fat is energy, dense energy. And when food must be carried across long distances, when winter limits fresh plant foods, and when your body is continuously losing heat to the environment, dense energy becomes extremely valuable. One preserved food associated with the peoples of the plains is pemmican. The basic idea is beautifully practical. Meat is dried until much of its moisture is removed. Then it is pounded or shredded into smaller pieces and combined with rendered fat. Depending on the people, place, and available ingredients, berries may also be included. The finished food is compact. It keeps well when properly prepared. It can travel, and it carries a great deal of energy in a relatively small amount of weight. For a mobile society, these qualities are difficult to overvalue. Imagine the alternative. Fresh meat is excellent when a buffalo has recently been killed. But fresh meat does not politely remain fresh simply because you intend to travel next week. It spoils, it attracts animals, it contains water, which adds weight. Preservation changes the problem. Drying removes much of that moisture. Fat adds concentrated energy. The result can be carried farther and stored longer. You take a portion of food, it is not elaborate, there is no decorated plate. No long menu, no concern about presentation. Breakfast has a more serious purpose. Your body spent the night burning fuel, now you replace it. The first bites are deeply satisfying. Heat from the fire touches one side of your face, while the morning air cools the other. Around you camp continues waking. Someone is already attending to horses. A child moves past carrying something useful. Smoke rises from neighboring lodges. The canyon that protected everyone during the night is slowly filling with daylight. Food and shelter seem like separate subjects. They are not. The better fed you are, the better equipped your body is to face cold. Your internal heat does not appear from nowhere. It is produced through metabolism. You eat. Your body breaks down the food. Energy becomes available for movement, repair, thought, and heat. In cold weather, that last function becomes especially important. This does not mean eating a mouthful of buffalo fat magically makes you immune to freezing. Nothing in this story works that way. Food is another layer. Just like the canyon, just like the teepee, just like the robe, just like the preserved ember. Each one reduces the danger together. They create resilience. And fat has another advantage. It stores a great deal of energy for its weight. When every possession may eventually have to travel by horse or travois, weight matters. A portable food with high energy value is useful not only in winter camp but during hunting, travel, and warfare. The Comanche world is mobile. Food must sometimes be mobile too. You chew slowly and watch a horse being led past the lodge. Its coat is thick against the cold. Steam briefly leaves its nostrils. The animal lowers its head, impatient to move. Horses themselves require enormous amounts of energy. This is easy to forget when we imagine mounted peoples of the plains. A horse is not a machine waiting to be switched on in the morning. It eats, it drinks. It becomes tired. It can become injured. It needs grazing. It must survive winter too. A band with many horses, therefore, carries an invisible responsibility everywhere it travels. People need food. Horses need grass. People need water. Horses need much more. A beautiful campsite that provides excellent shelter, but poor grazing may not remain beautiful for long. The winter landscape must be read not only for human needs, but for animal ones. This is part of the reason Comanche mobility becomes so sophisticated. The horse transforms distance. Before horses become central to life on the plains, movement follows different limits. Afterward, a mounted society can hunt across greater distances, travel rapidly, carry more possessions, conduct raids far from home, trade across vast territory, and relocate camps with remarkable speed. But every advantage creates another requirement. More horses mean more grazing. More grazing means greater attention to landscape. Greater mobility means equipment must remain portable. The tipi, the travois, preserved food, horse knowledge, and seasonal movement all become pieces of the same world. You finish eating. Warmth has returned to your fingers. The hunger that woke with you begins to disappear. Now imagine that night again, but remove the food. The canyon still blocks the wind. The tipi still provides shelter. The robes still trap warmth. But your body enters the night already short of energy. Perhaps you have traveled hard. Perhaps hunting has been poor. Perhaps supplies have been lost. The temperature falls. Your body must maintain its core temperature anyway. It begins spending what energy remains. Cold becomes harder to tolerate. Fatigue deepens. The other layers must work harder because one part of the system has weakened. This is why stored food is more than convenience. It is winter security. A successful hunt during warmer or more abundant periods can feed people later, provided the meat is preserved properly. Again, the invisible hero is preparation. The meal saving you on a bitter morning may have begun with work performed days or weeks earlier. The animal had to be hunted. The meat had to be butchered. Some portions had to be eaten fresh. Others could be cut thin and dried. Fat had to be rendered and preserved. Everything had to be protected from moisture, insects, scavenging animals, and spoilage. Nothing about preservation happens by accident. The work is repetitive: smoke, cutting, drying, pounding, packing, storing, checking, moving, eating, then doing it all again when another animal is taken. History remembers the moment of the hunt because it is exciting. An animal runs, horses gallop, a hunter demonstrates skill. But the hours afterward determine how much of that animal actually becomes survival. Once more, women carry much of the work. Processing a large buffalo is demanding. Preparing hides is demanding. Preserving meat is demanding. Maintaining the camp is demanding. The mounted hunter may provide the carcass, but transforming that carcass into months of useful material requires another set of skills. The entire camp depends upon those skills. This pattern should now feel familiar. Comanche survival is cooperative. One dramatic warrior does not survive winter alone because he can ride beautifully. His horse depends upon grazing, his shelter depends upon labor, his clothing depends upon prepared hides, his food depends upon hunting and processing. His fire depends upon gathered fuel. His knowledge comes from generations before him. The image of the completely independent warrior begins to dissolve. In its place appears something more interesting: a network, families, animals, landscape, skills, memory, season. Every part connected. You step away from the fire, the sun has climbed higher, although the air remains cold. Frost retreats slowly from places touched by light. In shadow it remains. A few horses are being moved toward better grazing. Others remain near camp. You watch them with new attention. Among the Comanche, horses are not merely useful animals. They reshape society, they reshape warfare, they reshape hunting, they reshape wealth. And eventually, they reshape the struggle between the Comanche and the expanding powers pressing into their territory. The story of how this happens begins generations before the winter morning you're imagining. Horses had once lived in North America in distant prehistoric times, but they disappeared from the continent long before the world of the Comanche took shape. They return with Europeans. Spanish colonization brings horses northward from Mexico. For a time, colonial authorities attempt to control access to them. Control does not last. Animals escape, animals are traded, animals are captured, knowledge travels with them. Then, during the great upheavals of the late 17th century, the availability of horses in the Southwest changes dramatically. Indigenous peoples acquire them in increasing numbers. The consequences spread across the plains. For the Comanche, the transformation is profound. Over generations, riding becomes not simply a useful skill, but one of the foundations of their power. Children grow up around horses, young riders learn balance early, experienced horsemen develop abilities that astonish outsiders. A warrior can guide a horse at speed while using weapons. He can shift his body along the animal's side. He can use the horse itself as protection. He can cover distances that would exhaust a person traveling on foot. And perhaps most importantly, he belongs to a society that understands horses from birth. An outsider can purchase a horse. He cannot purchase childhood. That difference will frustrate soldiers later. Military men may possess saddles, weapons, uniforms, and organized supply systems. They may consider themselves experienced cavalrymen. Then they encounter riders whose relationship with horses has been cultivated from the earliest years of life. The comparison can be uncomfortable. But before the horse becomes an instrument of war, it is something simpler. Warm, alive, breathing. You walk toward the herd. The animals smell of hair, dust, leather, and the faint sharpness of sweat. One turns its head toward you. Its dark eye studies you for a moment before deciding you are not especially interesting. You place a hand against its neck. Even through the winter coat, you can feel warmth, a great deal of warmth. The animal is a living furnace. And suddenly one of the strangest stories about winter life begins to make practical sense. Accounts from the plains sometimes describe valued horses being kept extremely close to human shelter during severe weather, and traditions speak of horses even sharing sheltered space. The exact practice could vary with circumstance, camp, and people. But the principle is obvious when your hand rests against that warm neck. A horse produces heat. In dangerous cold, every source of warmth has value. More importantly, keeping horses protected is essential because losing them can be disastrous. A frozen or stolen horse is not merely a lost possession. It may mean lost transportation, lost hunting ability, lost wealth, lost military strength, lost capacity to move camp quickly. Your horse is part of the survival system. And so the system expands again. It began with your own body beneath a robe, then the tipi, then the camp, then the canyon. Now it includes the herd. Protect the horses and they protect your mobility. Feed them and they carry your home. Train them and they help you hunt the buffalo that provides your food and robes. Keep them close and their presence can even contribute to warmth and security. Every layer leads to another. The more you look, the less any single part of Comanche life can be understood alone. The sun climbs over the canyon wall. You stand beside the horse while its breath disappears into the morning. Tonight, the temperature will fall again. The robes will come out. The fire will become embers. Food will be eaten. The horses will gather near camp. And the entire system will repeat itself, winter after winter, generation after generation, until outsiders arrive who begin to understand something troubling. As long as the Comanche have their horses, buffalo, winter refuges, stored food, and portable homes, defeating a group of warriors in one battle accomplishes surprisingly little. They can leave. They can recover, they can hunt, they can rebuild, they can survive, and eventually an enemy will decide that the way to defeat the warrior is not simply to attack the warrior. It is to destroy the world that allows him to keep riding. But before we reach that darker canyon morning, we need to spend one more night beside the horses. Because when the wind returns after sunset, you will discover that Comanche horsemanship is not merely about speed. In winter, the horse can mean the difference between being trapped by the cold and being able to outrun it. Now we move from the cooking fire toward the horses, where warmth has 4 legs, a winter coat, and a habit of wandering away at exactly the moment you would prefer it not to. The day passes quietly. By late afternoon, the sun is already sinking toward the rim of the canyon. Shadows stretch across the lower ground. Places that received sunlight only a short while ago begin turning blue and cold. You can feel the temperature changing. So can the horses. They become more visible as they are brought nearer to camp. A large horse is an impressive source of heat. Place your hand against its neck or shoulder, and you feel immediately what its body is doing. Like you, the animal is constantly converting food into energy. Like you, it must maintain a warm internal temperature, while the surrounding air becomes colder. And unlike you, it cannot crawl beneath a buffalo robe. It carries its insulation with it. The winter coat thickens as the season changes, trapping air close to the skin. Horses may turn their hindquarters toward bitter wind. They may stand close together, reducing exposure while conserving warmth. But a horse surviving winter still needs fuel. Grass. And a great deal of it. This creates one of the less obvious problems of Comanche winter life. You cannot simply choose the warmest possible campsite for human beings. The horses must eat too. A narrow, protected canyon might shield a camp beautifully, but if the surrounding country cannot support the herd, the band cannot remain indefinitely. A large herd consumes grazing quickly. Water matters as well, so every winter refuge represents a compromise. Protection, water, fuel, grazing, access, security. The perfect campsite exists mostly in imagination. Real camps are chosen because enough needs can be satisfied at the same time. You begin to see the landscape differently. Yesterday, a patch of grass was simply grass. Now it is stored horse energy. A creek is not merely water. It is a reason the camp can remain. A sheltered side canyon is not simply an interesting geological feature. It may protect animals during severe weather. A trail leading toward the open plains is not merely a path. It is access to hunting country. Everything has function. The Comanche relationship with horses develops within this practical world. By the 18th century, horses have transformed life across much of the plains, but few peoples become as closely identified with mounted life as the Comanche. Their reputation among neighboring peoples, Spanish colonists, Mexican communities, traders, and later Americans grows partly from extraordinary mobility. A mounted group can appear far from where outsiders expect it. It can travel rapidly across country that seems empty. It can raid, trade, hunt, withdraw, and disappear. The plains that look open to an inexperienced traveler can become a kind of protective maze to someone who knows water, terrain, trails, and distance. You watch a young rider approach one of the horses. There is no dramatic lesson, no speech, no formal ceremony designed for your benefit. The child has simply grown up around the animals. That is important. Expert horsemanship is not created in a few weeks. Balance develops through repetition, confidence develops through repetition. Understanding the moods of an animal develops through repetition. The rider learns how a horse moves before consciously thinking about every movement. An outsider can learn to ride well, but someone raised in a mounted culture begins accumulating experience before adulthood. By the time a Comanche boy becomes a warrior, horse and rider can operate with an ease that repeatedly surprises observers. The military consequences are enormous. A mounted warrior can approach quickly, release arrows, change direction, and withdraw before a slower enemy responds effectively. Comanche riders become famous for shifting their bodies along the sides of their horses, using the animal as partial cover. From a distance, an opponent may see little more than the horse itself. Then an arrow arrives. This requires balance, strength, timing, and an extraordinary familiarity between rider and animal. But tonight, nobody is firing arrows. The horses are being secured for darkness, and that quieter activity matters just as much. A valuable horse wandering away overnight can create serious trouble. A stolen horse can create even more. Horse raiding is woven deeply into the economy and warfare of the plains. Animals are wealth. A person with many good horses possesses transportation and influence. Horses can be exchanged, given, taken, won, lost. Their quality matters as much as their number. One horse may be preferred for hunting, another for speed, another for carrying loads. Another may be especially trusted in danger. This means the herd is not simply a collection of identical animals. Experienced owners know individuals. They know temperaments, strengths, weaknesses, which animal is dependable, which one is difficult, which one is fast, which one seems determined to make every ordinary task unnecessarily complicated. Some things about horses remain timeless. Darkness settles. The first stars appear. You return toward the teepee. Behind you, the animals become shapes in the fading light. Their presence makes the camp feel larger than the circle of human shelters. The Comanche winter community includes them. This matters when we think again about warmth. Stories from the plains describe people protecting especially valuable horses closely during extreme weather, and traditions sometimes place horses unusually near human shelter. It would be a mistake to imagine every Comanche family casually fitting an entire herd inside a teepee. That would create problems of its own. But keeping valuable animals sheltered and close makes practical sense. Their survival is tied directly to yours. A horse lost to exposure cannot pull a travois tomorrow. It cannot carry a hunter. It cannot help move camp. It cannot carry someone away from danger. Protecting mobility during winter means protecting the animals that make mobility possible. And on a bitter night, the heat of a nearby animal is hardly unwelcome. You enter the teepee again. The transformation from outdoor cold to protected interior is immediate. The fire is modest. Bedding has been arranged. Your robe waits. Food has already given your body energy for the night ahead. Everything feels familiar now. Only a short time ago, you might have looked at this shelter and seen a primitive tent. Now you see a machine made from knowledge. Not a machine of metal gears, a machine of relationships. Cool air enters, smoke rises. The lining controls drafts, the covering resists weather, the fire provides heat, the robe traps it, the bedding protects you from the ground. Food fuels your body, the canyon weakens the wind, the horses preserve your ability to move. Each part connects to another. Remove the fire and the robe still helps. Lose one robe and the fire still helps. If fuel becomes scarce, better shelter reduces how much is required. If the campsite becomes poor, horses allow the band to relocate. If hunting fails temporarily, preserved food buys time. The system bends before it breaks. That flexibility is perhaps more important than any single piece of equipment. You lie down. Outside, wind begins moving through the canyon again. Tonight it carries a sharper edge. You hear the teepee covering respond with a faint movement. The poles remain steady. A few sparks rise from the fire, then the flames settle. You pull the robe over yourself. Your body begins warming the air trapped beneath it. Slowly, the familiar pocket of comfort returns. And while you wait for sleep, imagine removing one layer. First, remove the canyon. Place the same camp on the exposed plateau. The wind becomes stronger. The teepee must work harder. Fuel disappears faster. Now remove the lining. Cold drafts become more difficult to control. Remove the bedding. The frozen earth begins drawing heat downward. Remove the buffalo robe. Your body loses warmth more rapidly. Remove the stored food. Your body enters the night with less energy. Remove the horses. Now, even if conditions worsen, movement becomes slower and harder. One missing layer creates inconvenience. Several missing layers create danger. Remove nearly everything at once, and the winter becomes an enemy that courage cannot defeat. Remember that? Because later, someone else will understand it too. The United States Army spends years confronting Comanche mobility on the southern plains. Again and again, soldiers discover how difficult it is to force a decisive encounter with people who know the country better than they do. A column can march into empty country. The Comanche can simply be elsewhere. Soldiers require supply lines, horses require forage, water must be found, equipment slows movement, weather interferes, distances become exhausting. A military expedition may be powerful on paper and miserable on the ground. The Comanche, meanwhile, possess generations of geographic knowledge. They know routes between water sources, they know sheltered country, they know where buffalo are likely to move, they know how to travel light, and they know how to survive nights that leave poorly prepared pursuers exhausted. The problem facing the army becomes obvious. Winning a fight is not enough. Even finding the fight is difficult. And if a Comanche band escapes with its horses and supplies, it can recover. A burned fire can be rebuilt. A temporary camp can move. Food can be gathered again. A warrior can ride hundreds of miles from the place where soldiers last saw him. The very flexibility that keeps a family alive in winter also makes military conquest extraordinarily difficult. So strategy begins to change. Instead of asking only how to defeat warriors in battle, military planners increasingly focus on the resources that allow resistance to continue. Horses, food, shelter, winter stores, and, most devastatingly, buffalo. The logic is grim. If mobility is power, destroy mobility. If buffalo support life, destroy access to buffalo. If winter camps allow people to recover, attack the winter camps. If stored food carries families through cold months, burn the stored food. The system that protected you through the night becomes a map of vulnerabilities. Not because it is badly designed, because every human society depends upon something. A city depends upon food arriving. An army depends upon supplies. A farm depends upon land and weather. A mounted plains society depends heavily upon horses, grazing, buffalo, water, shelter, and accumulated stores. Destroy enough of those things at once, and even the most skilled people face impossible choices. The fire gives a soft crack. You stare toward it. It is difficult to connect this peaceful scene with what will come later. A child sleeps nearby. Someone outside checks the horses one final time. Robes lie across sleeping bodies. Food is stored for future days. The teepee stands quietly beneath the stars. Everything that makes the night safe is also something that can be taken away. For generations, mobility has been protection. The Comanche can leave danger behind. But an enemy is learning to attack not merely where people are standing. It is learning to attack what they will need tomorrow. And this changes the war. You close your eyes. The horse outside stamps once against the earth. Then again. Eventually, even that sound fades. The night returns to its old rhythm. Wind, breathing, coals, hide, horse, silence. For now, every layer remains intact. You have shelter, you have bedding, you have food, you have fire. You have horses. You have somewhere to go when morning arrives. But years from this imagined night, in the Texas Panhandle, soldiers will descend into a canyon where Comanche, Kiowa, and Southern Cheyenne families have gathered with the very things that make winter survival possible. The fighting itself will not be the most destructive part. What happens afterward will matter far more. So let us leave the sleeping horses behind and drift toward a colder morning. A morning when an army finally stops chasing only warriors and begins attacking the system that allows them to survive. Let us cross the darkened plains now, leaving the warm horses and sleeping camp behind as we move toward a different kind of winter night. This time, you are not resting beneath a buffalo robe, you are riding. The wind strikes your face hard enough to make your eyes water. Your horse moves beneath you with a steady rhythm, its breath appearing in pale clouds before disappearing into the darkness. Somewhere behind you, several other riders follow. There is no moon bright enough to reveal much of the country, only stars, grass, occasional shadows, and the strange feeling that the horizon never gets any closer. This is another side of Comanche winter survival. Sometimes the safest place is not a well-prepared camp. Sometimes survival depends upon being able to move through the cold. A warrior traveling across the plains cannot carry the entire comfort of a family teepee with him. There may be no carefully arranged bedding waiting at the end of the night, no large supply of fuel, no canyon already chosen, no family fire preserved beneath ash. Travel strips the winter system down to its essentials: clothing, robes, food, horse, knowledge, and judgment. The last of these may matter most. You can possess excellent equipment and still make a fatal decision. Ride too long after becoming exhausted. Allow clothing to become wet. Stop in exposed country. Ignore the changing wind. Fail to protect the horse. Use too much fuel too early. Sleep directly against frozen earth. Each mistake removes a little safety. The plains do not need you to make one enormous error. Several small ones will do. Your horse continues forward. You lean slightly over its neck. The movement keeps your body working, but riding is not the same as walking. The horse is producing most of the effort while you sit exposed above it. Cold begins with your fingers, then your toes, then your face. The temptation is to think of cold as a sensation. It is more useful to think of it as a process. Your body produces heat, the environment removes it. Wind accelerates the loss. Wet clothing can make the problem worse. Contact with cold ground can draw still more warmth away. Survival means slowing those losses while continuing to produce enough heat internally. Again, there is no need for anyone around you to describe this with scientific terminology. Experience teaches the lesson clearly enough. A rider knows that a sheltered hollow feels warmer than a ridge. He knows that dry fur is more useful than wet fur. He knows that a full stomach makes a cold journey easier. He knows that a tired horse needs care before it can carry him farther. He knows that stopping in the wrong place can be worse than continuing for another stretch of darkness. Knowledge lives in decisions. Ahead, the lead rider changes direction. At first, you see no reason. The country looks exactly the same. Then the ground begins to descend. The wind weakens. A shallow drainage appears. It is hardly a canyon, barely more than a depression in the land. But immediately the night feels different. This small change in elevation has reduced your exposure. The riders stop, not for the night, only long enough to rest. You slide from the horse. Your legs complain when your boots touch the ground. The horse lowers its head. You place a hand against its shoulder, warm, still warm. That matters. The animal has been carrying you through freezing air, but movement has generated heat. Now that it has stopped, the situation changes. Sweat is dangerous in cold conditions. A hard-ridden horse can become chilled if left exposed after exertion. So caring for the animal is part of caring for yourself. A warrior who treats his horse as disposable may discover the consequences far from home. The Comanche reputation for horsemanship is built not only upon spectacular riding, but upon practical animal knowledge. Good riders notice the condition of their mounts. They understand when an animal can continue. They recognize valuable horses. They train different animals for different purposes. And because horses represent wealth, mobility, hunting power, and military strength, protecting them is rational in every sense. You eat a small amount of preserved food. There is no feast. Travel food has a different purpose. It must be carried. It should provide useful energy without demanding elaborate preparation. Dried meat serves well. Food containing fat is particularly valuable. You chew while standing near the horse. The cold has made everything harder. The food feels tougher, your fingers feel clumsy. Even swallowing seems to require more attention than it should. But after a while, you feel better. Not instantly warm, simply stronger. That distinction matters. Food does not replace shelter. It supports the body that shelter is trying to protect. The riders wait only briefly. Soon you mount again. The horse starts forward. The rhythm returns. Hooves against hard ground. Leather moving softly. Wind above the drainage. Then open country again. For an outsider, traveling here at night might feel like entering an empty world. For someone raised on these plains, it is not empty. There are landmarks, water sources, trails, buffalo paths, river valleys, places where timber grows, places where enemies may wait, places where the ground becomes dangerous for horses, places where shelter can be found if weather turns. A landscape can contain information even when it contains no signs. The Comanche ability to move through enormous territories depends upon that memory. This is one reason pursuing them becomes so frustrating for military forces. A cavalry column carries its own limitations. Soldiers need supplies, their horses need forage, their route may depend upon wagons, wagons depend upon suitable terrain. Commanders depend upon maps and scouts. A Comanche group can often travel with fewer constraints. This does not make them immune to hunger, cold, injury, or exhaustion. It makes them adapted to a different system of movement. The distinction becomes obvious when weather worsens. A norther can transform the southern plains with astonishing speed. Warm or tolerable conditions may give way to bitter wind. Temperatures fall, the horizon changes, animals respond. A traveler who waits until the storm is fully upon him has already lost valuable time. So you watch the sky, you watch the riders ahead, you notice the wind. This habit of observation is part of the same winter knowledge that selected canyon camps. Weather is not background scenery, it determines action. The group turns again. This time, you are heading toward more deeply broken ground. The horse seems to know the route. Perhaps it has traveled here before. You allow your body to follow its movement. Hours pass strangely in darkness. There is no clock. Time becomes distance. The next water, the next rest. The next change in the stars. The next place where someone decides to stop. Eventually, a protected hollow appears. The riders dismount. This time, nobody immediately prepares to leave again. You have found the night's shelter. It is modest. There is no full family camp waiting here. No rows of tipis, no comfortable domestic world. But the ground is lower, the wind is reduced. That is enough to begin. The horses are positioned where they can be protected as well as circumstances allow. A small fire may be made, if fuel and security permit. Bedding is arranged from what can be carried. Robes become critical. You wrap yourself tightly. The enormous architecture of the winter camp has now shrunk into a traveling system. Instead of a large tipi lining controlling drafts, you depend more heavily upon terrain and clothing. Instead of several household resources, you have what fits on horses. Instead of stored supplies accumulated over a season, you have portable food. The principle, however, remains unchanged. Layers. Always layers. First, avoid the worst wind. Then insulate yourself from the ground. Then protect the warmth around your body. Then preserve enough energy to continue producing heat. Then protect the horse that will carry you away in the morning. No part needs to be perfect. Every part needs to help. You lie down, the ground is hard beneath the lower layers. Your horse is somewhere close enough that you hear it move. The little fire, if there is one, will not last forever. You do not expect it to. A winter traveler who depends upon a roaring fire throughout the entire night has created a problem for himself. Fuel must be gathered. Flame can reveal your location. Wind can scatter sparks. Fire requires maintenance, better to use it intelligently. Warm yourself, prepare food if needed. Heat what can store warmth, protect coals where possible, then allow insulation to do much of the work. You pull the robe closer. The night settles around you. There is something almost unsettling about how little separates your warm body from the enormous frozen landscape. A few layers of material, a depression in the earth, perhaps a small fire, a horse, knowledge. That is all. Yet this combination has carried generations of travelers across the plains. The system works because it does not demand comfort in the modern sense. It demands survival with enough rest to function tomorrow. That difference is important. A warrior who spends the entire night shivering violently may technically survive until sunrise, but he will not be ready for a hard ride the next day. He may make worse decisions, his reactions may slow. His horse may receive poorer care. His ability to hunt or fight may decline. Real winter survival is not simply avoiding death. It is preserving enough strength to continue living afterward. That is why sleep matters. Warmth matters because sleep matters. Food matters because warmth matters. Shelter matters because food alone cannot stop the wind. The horse matters because tomorrow may require movement. The system loops back into itself. You close your eyes. The stars continue moving above the plains. For a while, you sleep. When you wake, the darkness has changed. Dawn is still distant, but the deepest part of night has passed. Your face is cold. Your feet are reasonably warm. The horse is still nearby. Nothing dramatic has happened once again. That is success. And yet there is another reason Comanche warriors can travel through this country in winter, when pursuing forces sometimes struggle. They are not carrying only equipment. They are carrying a mental map built from generations of movement, a canyon remembered by a grandfather, a creek visited during childhood, a sheltered route learned during a hunt, a place where buffalo were found in another season, a spring that still produces water when nearby pools fail. This knowledge cannot be captured simply by taking a horse or copying a teepee. It lives inside people. And that creates a serious problem for anyone trying to conquer them. An army can occupy a fort, it can control a road, it can patrol a settlement. But the plains between those points remain enormous. The Comanche can move through them, they can raid far beyond military posts and withdraw. They can cross country that outsiders find confusing. They can use distance itself as protection. For years, this mobility helps preserve Comanche independence. But eventually, military strategy changes. Commanders begin looking beyond individual encounters. They begin asking what makes this mobility possible. The answer is painfully clear. Horses make it possible. Buffalo make it possible. Winter camps make it possible. Stored food makes it possible. Knowledge of protected places makes it possible. Family labor makes it possible. Destroy enough of these supports, and the mounted warrior becomes vulnerable without needing to be defeated in a dramatic duel. You lie awake beneath the robe. Perhaps the idea feels distant here. The night is quiet, the horses are safe, your food remains packed. Morning will bring another ride. But the world around you is changing. Buffalo herds will face industrial slaughter on an immense scale. Settlers will occupy more land. Military campaigns will press deeper into Comanche territory. And commanders will increasingly understand that winter itself can become a weapon if people are deprived of the things that protect them from it. The knowledge that once gave you an advantage can reveal where you are most vulnerable. You need horses, so horses can be taken. You need stored food, so food can be burned. You need robes and shelter, so lodges can be destroyed. You need winter refuge, so refuge can be attacked. The logic is cold, almost mechanical, and soon it will lead soldiers toward one of the great canyon refuges of the Texas Panhandle, but not yet. For now, morning is beginning. A thin grey line appears in the east. You sit up, your body protests. The robe falls from your shoulders, and the cold finds you immediately. Nearby, the horse raises its head. Soon you will ride again. You will carry your shelter with you, your food with you, your warmth with you, and your knowledge with you. The plains have taught you that survival rarely comes from overpowering the weather. You cannot intimidate the wind. You cannot threaten frost. You cannot order the ground to become warm. You survive by understanding what the cold will do before it does it. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the people pursuing the Comanche are beginning to learn the same lesson from the opposite direction. They are learning that to defeat a society adapted to winter, they may have to make winter adaptation impossible. The next part of our journey begins when that idea stops being theory. It begins when soldiers find the canyon. Now we leave the lonely winter trail and follow the riders toward a place where the earth opens beneath the plains. The canyon waits ahead. At first, you cannot see it. That is one of the strange qualities of this country. From a distance, the Texas Panhandle can seem almost impossibly flat. Grass stretches toward the horizon beneath an enormous sky. A traveler might believe the land will continue that way forever. Then the ground breaks. The plains fall away into walls of stone, steep slopes, narrow passages, creek bottoms, and hidden pockets of timber. Palo Duro Canyon. For generations, country like this offers shelter from the exposed plains above. Down on the canyon floor, water can be found. Wood grows along the drainage. The walls reduce the force of winter wind. Horses can be gathered. Tipis can be raised. Food can be stored. Families can prepare for cold weather. You already understand why such a place matters. You have spent nights beneath the robe. You have watched embers survive beneath ash. You have felt the difference between open wind and protected ground. You know that winter survival is built from layers. So when Comanche, Kiowa, and Southern Cheyenne families gather in Palo Duro Canyon during the late summer and early autumn of 1874, they are not simply choosing a picturesque place to camp, they are choosing security. Or what they believe is security. Above them, however, the war is changing. The Red River War is underway. The United States military is conducting a coordinated campaign across the southern plains, attempting to force remaining independent bands onto reservations. This time, the strategy is not merely to wait near forts and settlements. Military columns move into the country itself. They search for camps, they pursue people across the plains, they target horses and supplies. The aim is increasingly clear. Comanche mobility must be broken, and autumn makes the timing especially dangerous. You can imagine the problem from inside the canyon. Winter is approaching. This is the season when preparation matters most. Food stored now becomes food eaten during colder weeks. Robes and lodges become protection when the north wind arrives. Horses remain the means by which families can move, hunt, trade, escape, and rebuild. Lose these things in spring, and there may be months to recover. Lose them just before winter, and time becomes an enemy. On the morning of September 28, 1874, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie and soldiers of the 4th United States Cavalry reach the canyon. The world is still dark. Their approach is aided by scouts who know the country. Below them lie camps and horse herds. For the people sleeping there, the canyon itself has long been part of their protection. Its difficult approaches matter, its broken terrain matters. The steep descent matters. An enemy cannot simply march across level ground into the camp. But difficult is not the same as impossible. A route downward is found. The soldiers begin descending. Imagine being among them for a moment. Your horse must pick its way through darkness. The trail is narrow. Loose stone moves beneath hooves. Men proceed carefully, one behind another. A mistake here could send horse and rider down a slope. The very terrain that protects the camps below also makes the attack dangerous, but the soldiers keep moving down. Farther down, toward the canyon floor. Above, morning approaches. Below, families are beginning another day. Perhaps a fire is being uncovered. Perhaps someone is already awake beside the horses. Perhaps a child is still asleep beneath a robe. Perhaps breakfast is being prepared. These ordinary details matter because the people in the canyon are not arranged as soldiers waiting on a battlefield. This is a living camp. There are warriors, certainly, but there are also families, food, shelters, bedding, animals. Everything needed to carry life into winter. Then warning comes. The camp begins to understand that soldiers are approaching. The quiet morning disappears. People move quickly. Horses react to human fear. Voices rise. Warriors attempt to respond. Families begin escaping. The canyon that had been a refuge becomes a place of confusion. Comanche, Kiowa, and Southern Cheyenne fighters resist. But organizing a unified defense under sudden pressure is difficult. People scatter into the broken terrain. Some climb toward the plains above, others move through side canyons. The goal for many is no longer to hold the camp. It is to get away, and here something important happens. The fighting itself is not what ultimately makes Palo Duro so devastating. The battle produces relatively few casualties compared with what the soldiers could have inflicted upon a trapped population. Many people escape. If the story ended there, the Comanche system might do what it has done before. Move, regroup, find another place, rebuild, continue. Mackenzie understands this, so the soldiers turn toward what has been left behind: the lodges, the robes, the stored food, the equipment, the supplies, the horses. Everything you have spent these nights learning to value is suddenly exposed. Think again about the teepee. To a soldier ordered to destroy an enemy camp, it may appear to be a shelter made from hides and poles. You know better now. You know the labor inside it. You know that someone selected and prepared the hides. Someone maintained the seams. Someone understood the lining. Someone knew how to place it against the wind. Someone carried it from camp to camp. Inside it were bedding, tools, clothing, food, and the ordinary objects of family life. Burn the teepee, and you're not merely destroying a tent, you are removing one layer of winter protection. Now consider the buffalo robes. They are not decorations, they are sleeping insulation. Destroy them, and the frozen ground becomes more dangerous. The night air becomes harder to manage. Now the food. Dried meat and other supplies represent stored time. They are meals that do not need to be hunted tomorrow. Destroy them, and hunger begins working immediately. Then the horses. This is the most devastating layer of all. The soldiers capture an enormous herd, more than 1,000 animals according to historical accounts of the campaign. For the Comanche and their allies, those horses represent far more than transportation. You already know the list: hunting movement, trade, wealth, war, escape, the ability to carry a teepee, the ability to relocate children and possessions, the ability to follow buffalo, the ability to put distance between yourself and an enemy. Take the horses and the entire system slows. Mackenzie cannot easily take all of the captured animals with him, nor does he want them recovered. The solution is brutal. A great number of the captured horses are killed. The canyon fills with gunfire. Animals fall, again and again. For people whose lives are deeply connected to horses, the destruction is both practical and emotional. But from the military perspective, its purpose is coldly strategic. A surviving warrior without a horse is less mobile. A family without pack animals cannot move its possessions as easily. A band deprived of a herd cannot simply disappear across the plains with the same speed. The horse has been removed from the survival system. Then the camp itself is destroyed. Food disappears into fire. Lodges burn. Supplies burn. Possessions burn. Smoke rises through the canyon. Imagine standing on a slope and watching it. You escaped the attack. You're alive. That should feel like victory. But below you, winter is burning. The phrase sounds strange until you understand what is being destroyed. The weather itself has not changed. The first severe cold has not yet arrived, but the things that would protect you from that cold are disappearing. Your shelter, your bedding, your stored calories, your transportation, your accumulated material wealth, the physical results of months and years of labor, gone. This is why the battle cannot be understood only by counting casualties. A person can survive the fighting and still face a crisis afterward. Where do you sleep tonight? What do you eat tomorrow? How do you carry children and belongings? How do you hunt efficiently without enough horses? How do you replace winter robes before the cold becomes severe? How far can you travel on foot? Where are the buffalo? How much time remains? The system has lost several layers at once. Remember the winter night we imagined earlier. Remove the heated stone, and you remain warm beneath the robe. Lose the fire, and the robe still protects you. Lose one source of food, and perhaps stored supplies remain. One failure is survivable because the system contains redundancy. Palo Duro is different. Several layers are attacked together: shelter, food, horses, supplies. The attack is devastating precisely because it does not allow the remaining pieces to compensate easily. The Comanche had built a flexible system. The army attacks the flexibility itself, and there is another disaster unfolding beyond the canyon. The buffalo herds are disappearing. Commercial hunting has intensified across the plains. Animals are being killed on an enormous scale for hides and other products. Railroads and expanding markets make industrial slaughter increasingly profitable. The ecological and cultural consequences are catastrophic. For plains peoples who depend heavily upon buffalo, this is not simply the loss of one food source. It strikes at many systems simultaneously. Meat disappears, fat disappears, hides become harder to obtain. Materials for robes and shelter become scarcer. Hunting patterns collapse, trade changes, a central relationship between people, animals, and landscape is being violently broken. So when the camps at Palo Duro are destroyed, the people escaping them cannot simply assume the plains will provide everything needed to rebuild. The world outside the canyon is changing too. This is the trap. Military pressure from one direction, buffalo destruction from another, settler expansion, loss of resources, winter approaching, mobility weakened. The survival system that once absorbed individual shocks now faces many shocks together. You can almost feel the season turning. Days become shorter, nights become colder. A norther will eventually sweep across the plains. The wind will not care who won at Palo Duro. It will simply blow. And now some of the people facing that wind will do so without the shelters, robes, food stores, and horses they expected to possess. That is why the aftermath matters more than the brief fighting. The battle attacks tomorrow. For generations, Comanche strength has rested partly on the ability to survive after an enemy leaves. A camp can move, a warrior can retreat, a family can find another refuge. Horses can carry people across immense distances. The plains themselves can swallow a band from the view of pursuing soldiers, but a person who escapes without food, shelter, or transportation has fewer choices. Winter makes those choices fewer still. In the months after the campaign, pressure increases. Bands return toward reservation life. Independent resistance becomes harder to sustain. By the following year, the old military balance on the southern plains has been fundamentally broken. It would be too simple to say one battle alone defeated the Comanche. History rarely works so neatly. There were years of warfare, disease, political pressure, buffalo destruction settlement, military campaigns, economic change, treaties and broken agreements, internal decisions made under terrible constraints. Many forces converged. But Palo Duro reveals something especially important about the nature of the conflict. The army has learned where Comanche strength actually lives. Not only in the bow, not only in the rifle, not only in the warrior. It lives in the horse, the buffalo robe, the food cache, the portable lodge, the sheltered canyon, the family knowledge that turns all of those things into survival. Destroying those foundations can accomplish what chasing mounted warriors across endless grass often cannot. Evening approaches over Palo Duro. Smoke still hangs in places above the canyon floor. The surviving families are somewhere beyond the ruined camp. The wind begins to cool. And perhaps for the first time in our journey, the cold feels different. Earlier, it was a natural problem, something understood, something prepared for, something managed through generations of accumulated knowledge. Now the same cold has become part of a military strategy. Not because soldiers control the weather, they do not need to. They only need to remove the layers between a human body and winter. You look down toward the remains of the camp. The lesson is difficult to miss. The Comanche were not defeated because they failed to understand how to survive the plains. In some ways, the opposite is true. Their enemies eventually understood how effective that survival system was, and they learned where to strike it, but burned lodges are not the end of knowledge. A teepee can disappear in smoke while the understanding of how to build one remains. A robe can be destroyed while the skill of preparing hides survives in memory. A horse herd can be lost while stories of riding, breeding, and training continue through families. Material systems can be attacked quickly. Cultural memory is harder to erase, so we leave the smoke of Palo Duro behind. We follow the canyon northward, then outward across the plains, toward the final part of our journey. Because the last question is not how the Comanche survived one freezing night. It is how knowledge survives after the world that created it has been deliberately torn apart. We drift onward now, away from the smoke rising above Palo Duro Canyon, and into the colder silence that follows destruction. The battle is over, but winter is not. That distinction matters. A battle may last hours. Cold weather lasts night after night. Hunger returns every morning. A horse lost today is still gone tomorrow. A buffalo robe burned in September does not reappear when the first hard freeze arrives, and so you find yourself once more on the plains. Only this time something is missing. Many things, in fact. There is no familiar teepee waiting ahead. No carefully accumulated winter store. No large herd moving beside the families. Some people have escaped with horses, others have not. Possessions that once represented years of work have been left behind or destroyed. The landscape is still familiar, but familiarity cannot replace everything that has been lost. You know where shelter can be found. The problem is reaching it. You know how to stay warm beneath buffalo robes. The problem is obtaining enough robes. You know how to preserve meat. The problem is finding buffalo in a world where the great herds are disappearing. Knowledge remains. Materials are becoming scarce. This is one of history's crueler distinctions. Knowing exactly what you need does not guarantee that you can obtain it. The people moving away from the destroyed camps are not suddenly ignorant of winter survival. They have not forgotten how wind behaves. They have not forgotten how a teepee works. They have not forgotten how to prepare hides or preserve food. They have not forgotten how to care for horses. Instead, the material foundation supporting that knowledge has been attacked. Imagine a carpenter who still knows how to build, but has lost his tools and timber. The skill remains real, so does the crisis. Autumn deepens across the southern plains. The grass changes color, nights lengthen, cold fronts sweep southward. You have already felt what one of these northers can do. The temperature can fall rapidly, wind races across open country. The sky seems to become larger as warmth disappears. A person with proper shelter responds calmly. Find protected ground, raise the lodge, prepare bedding, eat, manage the fire, protect the horses. A person deprived of those resources must improvise. And improvisation becomes more difficult when children, older relatives, injured people, and exhausted animals are moving with you. This is why the destruction of a camp affects far more than warriors. War is often remembered through the people carrying weapons. Winter does not make that distinction. Cold reaches everyone: the infant, the grandmother, the hunter, the rider, the woman whose hands prepared the hides, the child who gathered fuel, the horse carrying what possessions remain. All depend upon the same network. As you travel, you begin noticing another absence. Buffalo, there are still animals on the plains, but the enormous herds that once seemed almost beyond counting have been subjected to catastrophic slaughter. Commercial hunters kill buffalo for hides and profit. Railroads help connect the plains to distant markets. Carcasses can be left behind after the valuable portions are taken. Bones later become commodities too. The scale is difficult to comprehend from the viewpoint of one traveler. You simply notice that country where buffalo should be abundant feels strangely empty. And for the Comanche, an empty buffalo range is not merely an ecological tragedy. It is a collapse of infrastructure. Remember everything the animal provided: food, fat, robes, tippy coverings, leather, sinew, bone, fuel, indirectly left across the grasslands, trade goods, materials woven through ordinary life. Remove the buffalo and many different shortages arrive together. This is the same principle you have encountered all night. Systems are strong when their layers reinforce one another. Systems become vulnerable when several layers disappear at once. You ride farther. Perhaps you are fortunate enough still to have a horse. The animal is thinner than you would like. Grazing has been uneven. Travel has been hard. You cannot simply demand more from it because circumstances are desperate. A horse has its own limits. If it fails, your world becomes much smaller. So you stop when stopping is necessary. You seek water. You allow the animal to graze. You inspect it. The relationship between Comanche and horse is often described through warfare because warfare produces dramatic images. A rider hanging from the side of a galloping horse is memorable. A rider waiting patiently while a tired animal grazes is not. Yet the second image may tell you more about survival. The horse must still be alive tomorrow. The same is true of you. This is the quiet arithmetic behind endurance. Do not spend everything today, not your food, not your fuel, not your horse, not your strength. Preserve enough for morning. The old winter system was designed around this idea. The tipi used a modest fire, rather than demanding endless fuel. Ash preserved embers, rather than requiring a completely new fire each morning. Pemmican and dried meat stored the energy of successful hunts. Robes preserved body heat, rather than trying to heat the entire world around the sleeper. Canyon camps reduced exposure rather than attempting to overpower the wind. Mobility allowed people to leave places where resources had become insufficient. Everything conserved something: heat, energy, time, labor, animals, food. That is why the system endured. And that is why destroying its reserves was so effective. As the weeks after Palo Duro pass, military pressure continues. For families attempting to remain independent, the choice is narrow: return toward reservation agencies and receive food. Continue moving and face increasing scarcity. Try to rebuild herds while military forces target them. Try to hunt buffalo while buffalo themselves are disappearing. Try to preserve the old patterns of mobility while access to land changes around you. There is no simple heroic answer. History sometimes prefers stories in which people face a clear choice between resistance and surrender. Real life is usually more exhausting. A father considers whether his children are hungry. A mother considers how much food remains. A rider looks at the condition of his horse. An older person wonders whether another journey can be endured. A leader must think not only about pride, but about everyone, depending upon his decision. Winter makes abstract questions immediate. You can argue about independence in summer. In winter, eventually someone asks what the children will eat. The wind moves across the grass. You pull your covering tighter. For centuries, Comanche power had grown partly because of extraordinary adaptation. The horse had been integrated into life with remarkable speed. Mounted hunting increased access to buffalo. Mounted warfare expanded military reach. Horse wealth supported trade and status. Mobility allowed bands to operate across a territory so large that outsiders gave it a name of its own: Comancheria. At its height, this was not some tiny refuge at the edge of colonial power. It was an enormous indigenous domain. Spanish authorities negotiated with Comanche leaders. Mexican settlements feared Comanche raids. American expansion encountered a society capable of projecting power across immense distances. The Comanche were not merely surviving in an empty wilderness. They were shaping politics, trade, movement, and warfare across a vast region. Yet the same interconnected world that made this power possible could be damaged through coordinated pressure. Take buffalo, take horses, restrict movement, destroy stores, attack camps, occupy land, force dependence upon government provisions. One by one, choices disappear. This is different from defeating an army in the European sense. There is no capital city whose capture ends everything. No single palace, no permanent military headquarters, no central warehouse containing all supplies. Comanche mobility makes such targets largely irrelevant. So conquest has to become something broader. It reaches into daily life, into food, into animals, into geography, into the ability to remain away from reservation control. That is why the story of freezing nights matters so much. At first, it seems like a small question. How did Comanche people stay warm? Buffalo robes, tipis, fire, canyons, food, horses. Simple enough, but follow the answer far enough and you discover an entire civilization of adaptation. A winter bed connects to buffalo hunting. Buffalo hunting connects to horses. Horses connect to mobility. Mobility connects to warfare. Warfare connects to geography. Geography connects to political independence. And suddenly, the humble buffalo robe beside your sleeping body is part of a much larger historical story. You stop for the evening, there is protected ground nearby. Not as good as Palo Duro, but enough. That word returns again. Enough. A small shelter is arranged, food is shared, a fire appears. Someone checks the horses, children settle near adults. You recognize every movement. The system has been damaged, but fragments of it remain. Someone still knows how to choose the ground. Someone still knows how to protect an ember. Someone still understands the robe. Someone still watches the weather. This is where military destruction reaches a limit. Objects can be burned quickly. Knowledge is more stubborn. A soldier can set fire to a teepee. He cannot burn the memory of how the poles are arranged. He can destroy stored meat. He cannot erase the knowledge of how meat is dried. He can kill a trained horse. He cannot instantly erase generations of horsemanship. He can force people onto a reservation. He cannot simply command them to forget the landscape they knew. Memory travels without a travois. You lie down. The bedding is thinner tonight. You notice the ground more than before. The robe over you is worn, the fire is smaller, yet the familiar sequence continues. Protect yourself from below, trap warmth above, keep dry, eat enough, preserve fuel. Watch the weather, keep the horses close. Survive until dawn. There is sadness in the repetition now, but there is also continuity. The system does not vanish in one morning simply because its material abundance has been shattered. People carry pieces forward. Stories survive, techniques survive, family knowledge survives, the Comanche themselves survive. This is important because historical storytelling has an unfortunate habit of allowing indigenous peoples to disappear at the moment military resistance ends. A battle occurs, a surrender follows, the book closes, but people do not become past tense because a military campaign ends. They wake the next morning, they raise children, they speak, remember, adapt, disagree, work, mourn, celebrate, continue. The Comanche nation continues. The descendants of the people whose camps once stretched across the southern plains do not exist only inside stories about 19th century warfare. Their history did not end at Palo Duro, nor did their knowledge. You listen to the wind outside. It sounds much as it did during your first night. That may be the strangest thing. Empires change, borders appear, buffalo herds collapse, and later begin partial recovery. Military forts are abandoned, railroads arrive, towns grow, roads cross the plains. But a winter wind still comes south. The canyon wall still blocks some of it. Dry insulation still traps air. A protected ember still retains heat longer than an exposed one. Fat still carries dense energy. A horse still produces warmth. The physical principles have not changed. The Comanche did not need laboratory language to discover them. They needed observation. A person tries one campsite and remembers it was colder. Another location works better. A lining reduces drafts. A thicker winter robe performs better than a summer hide. A certain way of arranging bedding protects against the ground. A certain amount of food makes a long winter ride easier. Generation after generation, experience becomes culture. Culture becomes technology. Technology becomes survival. And survival becomes history. The fire sinks lower. This time, you know not to worry. There will be embers beneath the ash. You know the robe will become warmer after your body has heated the air trapped inside it. You know why the ground beneath you has been covered. You know why the camp sits out of the worst wind. You know why someone checked the horses before sleeping. Things that seemed simple at the beginning of the journey now carry meaning. That is perhaps the greatest difference between your first night and this one. The cold has not become weaker. You have learned how the people living here understood it. And there is one final morning waiting for us, a quieter morning. No cavalry descending a canyon, no burning camp, no galloping warriors. Just the long memory of a people who endured after the military world of Comancheria was forced to change. So rest for a little while beneath the robe. Let the wind pass overhead. Let the embers darken beneath their blanket of ash. And when we wake again, we will follow what survived. Not the fire, not the teepee, not even the horse herd. The knowledge. Morning comes quietly, there is no bugle. No cavalry column. No sudden rush of horses through a canyon. Only pale light spreading across the southern plains. You wake beneath the robe and remain still for a moment. The fire appears dead again. But by now, you know better. Someone reaches into the grey ash and carefully uncovers the darker layer beneath it. A faint red point appears. Then another. A little air, a little dry fuel, a thin curl of smoke. And yesterday becomes today. It is a fitting place to end our journey, not with a great fire, with an ember. Something small enough to overlook, yet stubborn enough to survive the night. You sit up slowly. Cold air reaches the warmth beneath your robe, and you immediately pull it around your shoulders. Outside, frost lies across the grass. A horse is already awake. Its breath rises in the morning air. Someone walks toward the water. Someone else tends the newly revived flame. Nothing here would look especially important to a passing observer, but you have spent enough nights on these plains to recognize what you are seeing. Knowledge in motion. The camp may be different. The buffalo herds may no longer cover the horizon as they once did. The great independent world of Comancheria has been transformed by warfare, settlement, ecological destruction, confinement, and political pressure, yet people remain. That fact deserves more attention than it often receives. Historical stories have a tendency to stop at surrender. They follow a people until military resistance ends and then quietly turn toward the victors. The conquered disappear from the page. But real people do not disappear when a historian changes chapters. Comanche families continue living, children are born, languages are spoken, stories are remembered, relatives teach relatives, old skills change because circumstances change. Some practices become difficult to maintain. Others survive. Some knowledge moves from daily necessity into ceremony, memory, craft, teaching, or historical identity. Adaptation continues. It always has. After all, the Comanche world you have been traveling through was itself the product of adaptation. The horse was not always part of Comanche life. Once horses became available in greater numbers, Comanche people did not merely add riding to an unchanged society, they transformed around the animal. Hunting changed, travel changed, trade changed, warfare changed. Wealth changed, territory changed. A people capable of adapting so profoundly to the arrival of the horse did not suddenly lose the ability to adapt when the 19th century plains world collapsed around them. But adaptation after conquest comes with pain. There is an important difference between changing because you see an opportunity and changing because your alternatives have been violently removed. Reservation life restricts movement. Government policies interfere with traditional systems. Children in later generations face assimilationist institutions designed to separate indigenous communities from language and culture. Land changes hands, economic systems change. The buffalo economy that supported so much of Plains life cannot simply be restored by memory alone. Still, memory matters. You step outside, the sun is climbing. For a moment, look at the land itself. Palo Duro Canyon remains. The Llano Estacado remains. Creeks still cut through the country. Winter northers still sweep south. The wind still behaves according to the same physical rules it followed when Comanche families chose protected camps generations ago. Stand on an exposed ridge, and you feel the cold more sharply. Walk down into sheltered ground, and the difference can be immediate. The canyon remembers nothing. Stone does not keep history the way people do, but the landscape preserves the conditions that shaped the knowledge. And now you can read some of them. You see a canyon wall and think windbreak. You see thick winter fir and think trapped air. You see dry grass and think insulation. You see a bed directly on frozen earth and understand the danger beneath it. You see ash over a fire and wonder whether an ember is still alive. You see fatty preserved food and understand why portability and energy density matter. You see horses near a winter camp and understand that they represent far more than transportation. The ordinary landscape has become legible. This is perhaps what traditional knowledge often does. It turns surroundings into information. To someone passing quickly through the plains, grass is grass. To someone whose horses depend upon it, grass has quality, season, abundance, and location. To an outsider, a canyon is scenery. To a family seeking winter shelter, its orientation, water, timber, access, and grazing matter. To an outsider, buffalo hide is material. To someone preparing a winter robe, the season in which the animal was taken matters. Knowledge creates distinctions, and distinctions create choices. Those choices can keep someone alive. You walk toward the horse, it watches you approach. Perhaps you remember the first time you placed your hand against a horse's winter coat during this journey. You expected an animal, you discovered part of an entire system. The horse carries people, it carries possessions, it pulls the travois, it supports hunting, it enables long-distance travel, it provides military mobility, it represents wealth, and because the animal itself must eat, drink, rest, and remain protected, it also shapes where people can live. Nothing exists alone. That has been the quiet lesson beneath almost every part of our story. The teepee does not work alone. The robe does not work alone. The fire does not work alone. The canyon does not work alone. The food does not work alone. The horse does not work alone. Even the warrior does not work alone. The romantic image of the solitary Comanche rider racing across an empty plain hides the enormous network supporting him. Someone raised the horse. Someone trained it. Someone prepared food, someone processed hides, someone maintained the lodge, someone taught the rider where water could be found, someone remembered the route through the canyon, someone taught him how weather changes, someone cared for him when he was a child. Behind every apparently independent person stands a community of accumulated knowledge. This is why the destruction at Palo Duro was so significant. The attack struck the network. The military did not need to defeat every Comanche warrior individually. Destroy enough horses, supplies, shelters, and food, and the conditions supporting continued resistance become much harder to maintain. Combine that with the catastrophic destruction of buffalo herds, and the pressure becomes overwhelming. The strategy was effective because it recognized dependence, but dependence is not the same as weakness. Every society depends upon systems. Modern cities depend upon electricity, roads, water systems, food distribution, communications, and fuel. Remove enough of them simultaneously, and the apparent strength of the city begins to look very different. The Comanche winter system was remarkable because many of its pieces were portable and renewable. A teepee could move, food could be preserved, horses could reproduce, buffalo could provide multiple resources. Fire could be carried from one day into the next as embers. Knowledge could travel inside memory. The system did not require a warehouse or a permanent city. That flexibility helped Comanche people dominate enormous stretches of the southern plains for generations. And when military forces finally succeeded in breaking independent resistance, they did so partly by attacking that flexibility. You return to the small fire. It has grown now. A pot rests nearby. The morning is becoming ordinary. That feels appropriate, because perhaps the greatest mistake we make when imagining survival in the past is expecting every moment to be dramatic. Most survival is routine. Gather fuel before you need it, prepare food before hunger becomes desperate, repair the shelter before the storm arrives, keep bedding dry, watch the horses, notice the wind, teach the children, remember the route, do it tomorrow, then again. Then again. Years pass. Children become adults. They perform the same tasks with small improvements. They teach another generation. Eventually, what began as individual observation becomes tradition. Tradition is sometimes described as though it were the opposite of innovation. Here, that distinction makes little sense. A successful winter tradition is accumulated experimentation. Someone discovered what failed, someone remembered, someone found something better. The lesson remained because forgetting it had consequences. The teepee lining is not useful because it is old. It remains old because it is useful. The same is true of choosing protected ground, of preserving food, of layering insulation, of conserving fuel, of caring for horses. Age alone does not make knowledge wise. Repeated testing does. And winter tests without mercy. You look toward the horizon, imagine once more that first freezing night. You have arrived with almost no understanding of the plains. The wind frightens you. The tipi seems thin, the buffalo robe seems crude, the fire seems too small. You wonder how anyone sleeps here. Now return to that same night with everything you have learned. The canyon wall is already blocking much of the wind. The tipi controls air and smoke. The lining reduces drafts. The bedding slows heat loss into the ground. The winter robe traps warm air around your body. The fire adds heat without needing to become enormous. The embers are protected for morning. Stored food gives your body energy. The horses preserve mobility. The camp's location provides access to water, fuel, and grazing. There is no miracle. That is what makes it impressive. The system works through many ordinary things arranged intelligently. Perhaps that is why it can teach us something even now. Not because you should recreate 19th century Comanche life on your next cold camping trip. And certainly not because historical indigenous knowledge should be reduced to a collection of convenient survival tricks. The techniques make sense because they belong to a larger culture and landscape. Remove that context, and you lose much of their meaning. The tipi is not merely an efficient tent. The horse is not merely transport. The buffalo is not merely raw material. These things exist within relationships, responsibilities, beliefs, family structures, and histories much larger than the practical questions we have explored tonight. Still, the practical intelligence is worth recognizing. The people who lived on the southern plains were not simply enduring an environment Europeans found harsh. They understood it. They organized life around it. They learned where to move and when. They developed portable architecture suited to mobility. They used available materials efficiently. They created systems with overlapping protection. And they passed those systems across generations without needing the modern scientific vocabulary we might use to describe the same physical principles. Observation came first, words came later. The fire crackles. Morning light reaches farther into the camp. Soon, people will move. Perhaps the teepee will come down. Perhaps the horses will be loaded. Perhaps the camp will remain another night. The decision depends upon conditions. That is another lesson. Do not move simply because movement is possible. Do not remain simply because remaining is comfortable. Watch, judge, adapt. The plains reward attention. You take one final look toward the frost. It is beginning to melt where sunlight reaches it. Drops of water gather on the grass. The frozen night that seemed so enormous only hours ago is disappearing quietly. By afternoon, someone might almost forget how cold it was. But preparations for the next night will begin before darkness. Fuel will be gathered, food will be considered. Bedding will be kept ready, horses will be watched, weather will be noticed. Survival does not wait for the emergency. That may be the simplest truth of all. The Comanche did not survive freezing nights because they woke at midnight and suddenly became extraordinarily tough. They survived because the work began before sunset. And, in a larger sense, generations before sunset. The person arranging a robe tonight inherited knowledge from someone who had once been cold. The person choosing a sheltered campsite inherited memory from someone who had once chosen badly. The person preserving food inherited methods tested through hunger. The rider protecting his horse inherited centuries of accumulated horsemanship. Every comfortable winter night contains the memory of uncomfortable ones. Perhaps every successful tradition does. The fire that began as an ember is burning steadily now. You no longer need the robe around your shoulders. You fold it carefully. Outside, the horse stamps against the thawing ground. The canyon catches the morning light. And our long winter journey reaches its end. We began with a simple question. How could Comanche warriors survive freezing nights outdoors? The answer turned out not to be toughness. Not exactly. Toughness matters when conditions become difficult, but toughness without knowledge wastes strength. The deeper answer is a system. Shelter before cold becomes dangerous, insulation above and below the body, fire managed rather than merely consumed, food stored as energy. Horses protected because mobility matters. Landscape understood as part of the shelter itself, and knowledge carried from one generation into another. That system could be attacked. Its material pieces could be destroyed. At Palo Duro, many were. Across the plains, the destruction of buffalo struck at still more. The independent political and military world of Comancheria was eventually forced to an end. But the people were not. Today, the Comanche Nation continues as a living indigenous nation headquartered in Oklahoma. And that fact gives our final image its meaning. Not smoke, not ashes, not an empty canyon, an ember, protected through the darkest part of the night. Small enough to disappear beneath ash. Alive enough to make a new fire in the morning. So wherever you are listening tonight, allow the plains to fade. Let the horses move farther into the distance. Let the canyon walls disappear into darkness. Let the last campfire settle into red coals. You do not need to watch it until morning. Someone already knows how to keep it alive. And as the winter wind crosses the grass above Palo Duro, the people below pull their robes closer. The horses settle, and the night becomes quiet once again. Not conquered, not defeated, simply understood. And for tonight, that is enough.